Story follows a young man named Michael, who grew up surrounded by wealth and the love of his parents, Elizabeth and Dave. At just 20 years old, Michael looked up to his father, a successful businessman, but one night, a heated argument with his father led to a major fallout. Michael, furious, packed his belongings to leave the house. His father, equally enraged, disowned him, stating, "If you leave this house now, I don't want to ever see you again." Michael responded angrily, declaring, "I am done with you. I will never come back, and you are not my father." His father shot back, "You are not my son." As Michael stormed out, his father ensured he left with nothing, stripping him of all possessions except for a boxer and singlet. The next day, Michael's mother, Elizabeth, was worried about her son's sudden disappearance and confronted Dave, but he gave no reasonable response, leaving her even more anxious. A year later, Michael, not wanting to feel helpless, began hustling on the streets, fetching water in gallons and selling it to market women. One day, he received a call from his mother, who reminded him of their wedding anniversary and invited him to attend, though Michael refused to reveal his location for fear that his father would find out. On the day of the anniversary, Mr. Dave surprised his wife with a car, but she was disappointed. She told him, "Babe, this is not what I was expecting. The only thing I need right now is for our son to come back home." This upset Mr. Dave, and he retreated inside the house. Neither Michael nor his father was willing to explain the cause of their rift, leaving Mrs. Elizabeth in the dark. It was shocking, as they once had such a strong bond. Meanwhile, Michael found peace in his new life and formed a close friendship with a girl named Zara. He would fetch water for her for free, despite her offers to pay. Over time, Michael wondered if he had feelings for Zara, but one day she revealed her mother wanted her to marry a wealthy older man in his 40s. Zara, heartbroken, explained she didn't love him, but felt obligated to follow her mother's wishes to lift them out of poverty. Michael was devastated, but couldn't argue with her sense of duty. Later, Zara asked Michael why he had been avoiding her, and after a brief conversation, she shyly confessed she liked him too, but felt torn between her feelings and her responsibility to her mother. They shared an emotional moment, hugging as Michael empathized with her situation. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Elizabeth collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. Mr. Dave was distraught as he visited her, and her best friend, Yvonne, stayed by her side. Elizabeth expressed her fear that the doctor suspected something more serious was wrong with her, but Dave reassured her to stay calm and positive. Later that day, Michael and Zara were spending time together when Zara asked about his family. Michael lied, saying his mother was in the village and he was fatherless. When Zara asked if his father was dead or alive, Michael responded that he didn't know and didn't care. Zara, realizing their stories were similar, shared that her father had abandoned her when she was just 2 years old, leaving her unsure if he was still alive. The conversation turned emotional for both of them. As Michael was preparing to leave, Zara brought up her mother's ultimatum. She had just 2 months to marry the older man her mother had chosen. This left Michael heartbroken. The next day at the hospital, the doctor informed Mr. Dave that Mrs. Elizabeth had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He explained that the symptoms of pancreatic cancer, such as jaundice, abdominal pain, weight loss, and digestive issues, often appear late, making it harder to treat. However, with chemotherapy and possibly surgery, she had a chance of survival. Mr. Dave was devastated by the news. Days later, Michael and Zara were walking hand in hand when Zara shared the good news. She had decided not to marry the older man and instead follow her heart. "I love you, Michael," she confessed. Michael was overjoyed, but the moment was interrupted by a phone call from his mother, who revealed her cancer diagnosis. Shocked, Michael excused himself without explaining to Zara and rushed home. When he arrived, Michael met his mother's friend, Yvonne, who told him his mother was upstairs. Running to her room, he was heartbroken to see his mother in such a condition. They embraced, and Mrs. Elizabeth felt a sense of peace with her son back by her side. Later, while Michael was out buying fruit for his mother, his father, Mr. Dave, entered the room. Furious, he grabbed Michael and nearly hit him, demanding he leave the house. They argued until Mrs. Elizabeth screamed, forcing them to stop. Mr. Dave stormed out, leaving Michael shaken. That night, Mr. Dave returned home drunk and Michael confronted him, urging him to act like a decent husband for his mother's sake. Mr. Dave dismissed him, insisting Michael leave the house the next morning. "I don't want to see you ever again. You are not my son," he declared before leaving the room. The next morning, Michael and his father clashed again, shouting at each other until Mrs. Elizabeth came downstairs, disappointed in both of them. She pleaded for them to put aside their differences and support her during her illness. Although she feared she might not survive, she asked them to reunite as a family for her sake. Both men apologized, promising to be there for her. The following day, Michael made breakfast for his mother and served her in bed, watching her eat. Moments later, Mr. Dave entered with his own breakfast, replacing Michael's meal with his. Upset, Michael left the room. In his mind, he was trying to stay strong for his mother, who meant everything to him. Later, Michael realized he hadn't spoken to Zara in weeks, so he called her. As they talked, Mr. Dave overheard the conversation and asked, "Is that your girlfriend?" Michael chuckled and replied, "At least I have a girlfriend, unlike someone who's married." Confused, Dave pressed for clarification, but Michael told him to reflect on his actions and walked away, leaving his father perplexed. One beautiful day, Michael had just finished giving his mother her medication when she asked if he would accompany her to the hospital. As he was about to respond, his father interrupted, saying he would take her himself. Surprised, Mrs. Elizabeth suggested they could all go together, but Mr. Dave sternly replied, "This isn't a family trip. Michael doesn't need to come." Despite this, Michael assured his mother that he would join her, which enraged Mr. Dave, who warned Michael not to challenge him or he'd see a different side of him. The ongoing tension between father and son had become intense and alarming. The next day, as they were preparing to leave for the hospital, Mr. Dave helped his wife into the car and stopped Michael from joining them, driving off without him. Later that day, when Michael asked about his mother, Mr. Dave ignored him and walked away. Michael, frustrated, tried to be assertive, but his father pushed him aside and drove off. In the heat of their argument, Michael accused his father of being a bad man, unworthy of the title father, though he hadn't yet explained the real issue. Mr. Dave, unfazed by Michael's stubbornness, left. Feeling overwhelmed, Michael called Zara, but was too emotional to speak. After calming himself down, he called her back, apologizing for being silent. Zara asked about his mother, and Michael admitted he didn't know her condition because his father had taken her to the hospital and refused to give him any updates. Hearing this, Zara curiously asked, "Which father?" Realizing he'd slipped up, Michael quickly ended the call, leaving Zara confused and worried. Later that night, Michael was home alone when Yvonne, his mother's best friend, visited. He was surprised to see her and asked why she was there. "Aren't you my little brother? I'm here to check on you," she replied. Michael asked about his mother, and Yvonne assured him that she was fine and undergoing her next round of chemotherapy. Relieved, Michael invited her inside. However, Yvonne was shocked by how Michael referred to his father as "that man" and advised him to open up about what was bothering him. Despite her efforts, Michael remained silent and hardened toward his father. A few days later, the doctor called both Mr. Dave and Michael to his office and delivered bad news. Mrs. Elizabeth's cancer was progressing and had weakened her immune system. She needed immune boosters to prevent infections, and the doctor stressed the importance of emotional support for her recovery. At Mrs. Elizabeth's hospital ward, she urged Michael and his father to go home and resolve their differences, stating that only then could they visit her again. She added that Yvonne would care for her in the meantime. Mr. Dave tried to plead, but she was firm, telling them that the sooner they found peace, the better it would be for everyone. Back home, Michael sat alone in the living room, reminiscing over a glass of whiskey about the good times he had once shared with his father. Mr. Dave joined him on the couch in silence, and after a few minutes he broke the quiet by asking, "What happened? Why did you leave home?" Michael replied, "That was the least I could do after catching you cheat on my mom." Mr. Dave was confused and asked what made him think he had been unfaithful. Finally, Michael confessed that on the night of their anniversary last year, he had come home early to surprise his parents, only to find Mr. Dave and Yvonne looking into each other's eyes and leaning in for a kiss. Mr. Dave burst out laughing, much to Michael's surprise. He explained that Yvonne had just lost her mother that day, but had come to help with a surprise decoration for Mrs. Elizabeth's return. While comforting Yvonne during her grief, he gave her a supportive peck on the cheek, which Michael had misunderstood as something more. Hearing this, Michael was disappointed in himself for having been angry over a misinterpretation. With the truth out, Michael and his father finally lifted the burdens from their hearts. The misunderstanding resolved, they reconciled and hugged each other emotionally, confessing how much they had missed each other. And they were back to being close again, proving that communication is vital in resolving conflicts and misunderstandings. The following day, Michael and his father visited his mother in the hospital. Mrs. Elizabeth, thinking they were still at odds, asked why they were there together. To her surprise, they revealed they had reconciled, happily hugging each other. This brought joy and excitement to everyone, especially Mrs. Elizabeth. Later that day, the doctor shared good news. Mrs. Elizabeth's health had improved drastically, and she would soon be discharged. A few days later, Mr. Dave brought her home. Michael and Yvonne had already decorated the house and hid to surprise her when she arrived. Their surprise made her very happy as they went upstairs together. That evening at dinner, the family shared a meal in harmony. Mr. Dave asked Michael about his girlfriend, recalling the day he overheard Michael on the phone. At first, Michael denied having a girlfriend, but after receiving funny looks from his parents, he confessed. He told them her name was Zara and that they liked each other, but there was a problem. Zara's mother wanted her to marry a wealthy man to escape poverty. Disappointed, his parents listened, and then Mr. Dave suggested that Michael invite Zara over to meet them, leaving Michael amazed and happy. That night, Michael visited Zara. She was thrilled to see him, as she had been trying to reach him without success. She hugged him excitedly, and noticing the car, she asked about it. Michael apologized, saying it was a long story, but he promised to explain everything to her. Zara, still excited, hugged him again. The next day, Michael brought Zara to meet his parents. To her surprise, they offered to sponsor her education and help her mother start a business. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Zara knelt in thanks, astonished by the unexpected blessings. Michael's parents then excused the couple, giving them some time alone. Michael and Zara shared a kiss, enjoying their time together. As I've mentioned before, communication is essential in life. It can prevent many problems in relationships, marriages, and even friendships. Observation, they say, is the lowest form of knowledge. Learn to communicate. It helps. What did you learn from my story? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please subscribe to this channel for more updates on Nigerian movies. See you next time.